Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. A short break, so I'm going to call us back to order if you don't mind. I guess everybody minds. Nobody's listening to me. You see this? Yeah. Hi, everybody. Attention, everybody. Thank you. I know we don't have much of a break here, but just to keep us on track, I just want to introduce our next guests. So we have Sunil Gupta and Christina Wallace, and I'm going to, as I said before, read briefly from some bios just to get a little background on both of them, and we'll have them come onto the stage, and they're going to have a conversation. So Sunil is a professor of business administration here at Harvard, and he co-chairs the executive education program Driving Digital Strategy. He also, as many of you may know, has a course in HBS Online called Digital Marketing Strategy, equipping learners with the latest tactics and tools to acquire and retain customers, position their brand for success, and develop data-driven strategies. Christina Wallace is a senior lecturer of business administration here. She is a self-described human Venn diagram, one quote I've seen you use before and I love. She works at the intersection of business, technology, and the arts. That's thus the human Venn diagram part of this. She is a 3-time Tony-nominated Broadway producer, which I find very, very cool, and an active angel investor and author of The Portfolio Life, which explores how to design a resilient, fulfilling, flexible career. And she teaches an HBS Online course called Entrepreneurial Marketing, which equips learners with the entrepreneurial mindset and toolkit to create viable, scalable businesses with limited resources. So with that, I'm going to introduce them and get off the stage so we can get going. Thank you. Come on to the stage, Sunil and Christina.
All right, Christina, good to see you.
Lovely to see you.
Tony Awards.
Nominated, not yet won.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So let me start with that, a little bit of your background, because I was reading about you, and you say in your college you were a major in math and theater.
Yes.
That is a very unusual combination.
Yes.
How did that happen?
So I grew up studying classical music. I trained in piano, cello, and voice all the way through high school, and went to a pre-conservatory boarding school for music. And at the last minute said, I don't want to go to Juilliard, I want to go to college. And I went off to college, and my rebellion against classical music was theater. And I had always loved math. I was captain of the math team. It was the only team we had at Interlochen Arts Academy, because we were theater kids. We weren't actually any good at sports. And so I did both, math and theater, and then picked up a couple of minors, music, physics, political science. I always loved all of the things. So the human Venn diagram thing, I've been doing it forever. I just came up with a brand, a tagline for it, so that I could finally explain what the hell it is I'm doing with my career.
So from math and theater to a professor and marketing.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Went to New York, trying to become a theater director. Came back to that years later. Worked at the Metropolitan Opera in arts management, decided I liked the business side of the arts, came to Harvard Business School, did my MBA, and then the financial crisis happened, and there were no jobs. We've been in this moment many times. Career Services, back in 2010, 2009, said, have you guys heard of entrepreneurship? It allowed them to check employed at graduation on their surveys. And so I got introduced to entrepreneurship, and I started my first company basically right out of business school. Ended up founding 3 companies and working with another one over the next 10 years, and in every single one, I owned the go-to-market. I would never have called myself a marketer, but I owned customer and story and the data and the brand, and somehow that's marketing, I guess. And when I came to Harvard Business School, I came back about 10 years later when I had my first child, and I wanted to stay in the startup world, but I didn't have it in me to start another company while also having a newborn. My entrepreneurship professor, Tom Eisenman, recruited me back to join the entrepreneurship faculty. They needed someone to teach entrepreneurial marketing. And I thought, well, I'm not a marketer. And he's like, you can teach the class. And so I taught the class, and I was like, oh, I know all these things. Okay, this makes sense. And I loved it. And I taught it for 3 years, and then we got to turn it into a course for HBS Online. So
Fantastic.
I guess now I own the title marketer, I suppose.
That's great. That's wonderful. That's a wonderful background. So what is it about marketing that you like?
The story, first and foremost. I've always been a storyteller. I think that's why I love the theater piece, but it's always connected me to the customer and the why. Why are we here? What problem are we solving? What is our relationship to them? It is so much more than a transaction. It is so much more than let me sell you a thing so that I can get some dollars. It is let me explain why and how I can solve this problem once I understand what the problem is, and let's have this relationship. And I think that's why theater in particular for me, as opposed to film, was always the connection, because theater is a live experience with an audience. They say the thing that makes theater theater is that there is at least one person in the audience. Otherwise, you're just a crazy person talking to yourself. But having that live experience makes it a conversation. In film, you go off and you do it, and then you record it, and then it gets shared elsewhere. And so I think for me, this is why I was mostly drawn to consumer marketing, although I did dip my toe into B2B before I came back, and turns out that's pretty interesting too, because even in the B2B world, businesses don't buy things, people buy things. They just happen to be employed by businesses.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fun too. But it's always down to the story.
That's great. That's great.
Okay, so how did you get into marketing?
Oh, I'm an accidental professor. I
Well,
grew up
great.
as a, I did my engineering. I grew up in India, did my engineering, and did my internship with a German company, didn't like it. So it was a story of no's.
Yeah.
And then did my MBA, worked for a British company, didn't think my managers were doing a good job. So I thought I needed to,
Wait, how old are you?
I was like 24.
Okay. Basically every 24-year-old.
Every 24-year-old says. So I said, well, obviously I didn't learn as to how to make better decisions. I got to go learn, do another MBA. Sitting in India, I didn't have the money to come to Harvard Business School like you. So I applied for a PhD. This is pre-internet era. I don't know what PhD was all about. I thought it was like an advanced MBA. Somebody's giving me a scholarship, so why not? So that's how smart I am. So I came to do PhD, and I suddenly very quickly realized that this is not what I wanted. But once you start something, you end up finishing it. And after my PhD, I almost joined McKinsey because I always wanted to be in industry. But my advisor convinced me that somehow you need to stay in academia. And that's how I got into academia. And why marketing? Because in college, I liked my marketing professor and hated everybody else, as simple as that.
It's the power of one good professor.
Power of one good professor. So
Do you feel the pressure of that now when you're teaching, to be that one good marketing professor that
not the
other students will...
not the
live their
pressure, but
life?
every once in a while, there is a student I meet after 10 years and they say, oh, you changed my life. My first reaction was, oh my God, what did I do? Because hopefully I didn't mess up your life. But usually these are positive stories. But yeah, every once in a while you impact some people, and that's what's great about this particular profession.
So in the course of time that you've been studying marketing, how have you seen it change in particular? Because I jumped into the marketing world, the practice of it, in 2010, specifically in D2C,
Yeah.
in the world where it was like the beginning of Facebook, the beginning of online social media acquisition of customers, and beyond. What have you seen sort of in your tenure?
So I've been around much longer than that. And so the way I think about technology and marketing is you start with the consumers as to how consumers are affected by technology. We get information differently and we buy differently than ever before, right? So if you think about how we used to get information as consumers, we used to get from advertising on television. Then it became search. Then it became reviews from other people. Then it became influencers, and now it's from ChatGPT or TikTok. So the information that we get as consumers is different. As a result, how as marketing or brand you communicate with people is very different. The second thing is how we buy is of course very, very different through e-commerce site and others. And I think the third thing I will say is it also lowers the barriers to entry for new brands, right? So if I were an entrepreneur before, I couldn't advertise on television because I didn't have the kind of money, and I couldn't get my product on the Walmart shelf because Walmart wouldn't allow it to. But now I can, with $1,000, I can advertise on Google or Facebook, and with I don't need Walmart, I can directly partner with Amazon or Shopify or somebody else. So I think it just increases the nature of competition, and small players can certainly get into the game.
They can get into the game, but it's hard to get scale. I mean, this is what we've seen in D2C over the last 15 years. I got in 2010, 2011, when everyone was psyched. I mean, the venture capital world was pouring money into D2C brands, thinking this was going to be the next 10x return opportunity like software. And that is largely no longer the case. I mean, it's hard to find a VC other than maybe Forerunner Ventures that would touch the category now, because it's easy to get to 10 million in revenue. Anyone can put their ads out and build a brand on social media. It's really hard to get beyond that. It's hard to get that scale. And this is where P&G and Unilever and all of them still win, is at scale.
Yes, you're absolutely right that it's easy to start, it's harder to scale, and a lot of these startups are also realizing that you need this combination of online and offline, right? So whether it's Warby Parker or whether it's Glossier, everybody's starting their physical stores as well. They're all omni-channel. But at the same time, even if you are a 10, 20, $50 million brand, you can create problems for large brands. You can nibble at the edges. So as a large brand, you still worry about all these small piranhas nibbling at the edges. So yes, they're not billion-dollar brands, but they still create problems for me.
That's perfectly fair. The last company that I worked with before I joined the faculty was a company called Bionic, and we hated the term consultants. We certainly hated the term innovation consultants, but that was effectively what we were. We were veteran entrepreneurs and investors who worked with Fortune 500 companies to build innovation ecosystems. Basically, how do you build the internal engine of creating your own startups? Because of this exact problem, right? P&G and Citibank and Nike and all of these companies were saying these little bitty startups were, 1 or 2 or 3, not a problem, but you look at the market map of their brands, and all of a sudden, every single category was getting eaten away by this conglomeration of these small brands. And what they were realizing was it wasn't even from a product perspective. Like the products weren't necessarily any better. It was from a value prop or a positioning or a sales channel or the entire relationship to the customer. That piece of the go-to-market was in many cases, I mean, it's the entire story of Dollar Shave Club, right? The notion of subscription. These were not better razors. They're actually materially worse. But introducing an entirely new way to meet and retain the customer was what Unilever acquired, and the sense of humor in maybe the advertising. And so I think it's also been very interesting over the last kind of 10 or 15 years to see how the bigger companies have responded to this fragmentation, not just of channels, but of voice and of go-to-market and sort of all these different ways that it went from being kind of just a few channels, a few media platforms, a few ways for big brands to talk at customers. And now this feels like this just matrixed in every dimension way of where do you find your customers, where do you identify them, where do you intercept them, how do you influence them. It feels exhausting.
But that makes it fun, right? Marketing never stops changing. And to your Dollar Shave Club example, my son, when he started shaving, he subscribed to Dollar Shave Club. And I say, is the razor better? Is the blade better? He says, no. I said, is it cheaper? He says, no. So I said, why are you using it? But somehow it appeals to people.
Yeah.
And so
it's funny.
In business and marketing, we say best product doesn't always sell.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of not only create Steve Jobs was a great marketer, right? More than the product guy, he was a great marketer in terms of how he frames the thing. And that's the beauty of marketing. I mean, people say, what is the importance of marketing in a business? Marketing is the first line on the income statement. It generates revenue. Customers bring in revenue, and that's what marketing is all about. So that's what always fascinated me.
So where is it going from here?
So big changes, I mean, AI certainly is on everybody's mind.
Right.
And the way I think about AI is in 3 buckets. What AI is going to do is automate and augment what we're already doing. The second, it'll help you grow in ways that you probably couldn't grow before. And third is it'll disrupt. And let me give you an example of that. So automate and augment, you can create a brand logo, you can create an image, you can create a music, you can create a video, everything, right? Again, very easy.
It's infuriating from an entrepreneur's point of view of how much money and effort I put into the first brand
There you go.
creation. And it wasn't even that much, right? It was like 99 designs and whatever, some crowdsourcing, but the amount of effort to get that brand, even just so we could put up a landing page in 2010.
Yep.
And now I can spin up a landing page in about 60 seconds.
Yeah. So all that becomes very quick. But think about it, what will be the implication of it?
Yeah.
Everybody will be able to do it.
Yes.
And my hypothesis is that the cost of production will go down,
Yes.
but cost of attention will go up. Because as more and more people do it, as consumers, we'll be bombarded with all these kind of things, which means maybe only Google and Facebook will gain because they will make more money.
It is no longer a proxy for quality either,
Yes.
right? It's no longer a sign that this is a legitimate anything.
Yeah. So that's the automation part, and I think we'll see how it unfolds.
Yeah.
I see the fewer and fewer companies thinking about ways to use this technology to grow in ways that they couldn't. So I recently worked with SAP, which is, as many of you know, does ERP systems for large businesses. And they've been always using their sales force to go to large established businesses like IBM and BMW and so on and so forth to sort of sit with them and create a system that integrates with their processes. They could never reach out to small and medium enterprises because the cost structure didn't quite work for them, right? They couldn't sit with a small customer who provided only $50,000. But now with AI, they built an entire generative AI system, and they have a digital hub in Barcelona and many different parts of the world. And in the last 2 years, they've generated more than $1 billion by reaching to SMEs using generative AI. That could not have been done before. So I think that's a good example of saying not only how I use AI to reduce cost, but how I use it to reach customers that I couldn't do before because the technology allows you to do that. So I'll see that, I expect that to happen more and more.
That is a little bit terrifying because there's a whole framework that we generally teach in another course that I teach called Launching Tech Ventures that basically says, you know, you've got to, if you're trying to figure out how to get to say $1 million of revenue, you either have a couple of big whales or you've got a lot of really little accounts, and depending on sort of how many and how big, you either go, you know, Salesforce all the way down to like product-led growth, but like it's a really clear distinction based on how much effort is going to take and what that trade-off is of humans to the size of the account. And this is going to completely
change that.
upend that framework.
And the most exciting part is the third bucket for me, which is disruption.
Yeah.
So just a couple of days ago, I was at Google, and one of the things they're struggling with is how will search change because of all the GPTs, right?
Well, it has to.
And again, I'm pretty sure all of you probably start with ChatGPT rather than with Google search. And as a result, what happens to my search advertising? And I would say clicks are probably dead. So what happens as a result? Many of the companies are beginning to say, how do I do SEO, search engine optimization? Because I don't even show up in the organic results anymore. So every bit of that particular thing will change. And Google itself is struggling because they have Gemini, which is their own AI engine. But if they push more on that, they kill their own search. So do I push it to compete with ChatGPT? But if I push that, I kill my golden goose. So I think there's a big dilemma that is going on in many of these companies.
Sucks to be a well-diversified company, I guess.
There you go.
I mean, it's fascinating because I think there's also this element, right? We're adding this fragmentation of where we're finding the customers and how we're reaching the customers. But I think we're also seeing a really like savvy education of customers, right? We're seeing already in Gen Z and the customers that come up after it that are so much more savvy to marketing messages than I was at that age, where they can see through a hashtag sponsored TikTok post in a heartbeat. And they want a lot more authenticity. They want a lot more of a relationship with a brand than being pushed at and marketed at. So how do you think about that reconciliation of like, we're going to add automation to this process in order to do something at scale with, they still want the human touch, and they are going to be able to see through something that doesn't feel authentic?
So I think it's in some interactions as consumers, maybe we don't want human touch. So think about when you go to airport.
Are you telling me you don't want someone to help you at an airport?
I don't want to talk to an agent when I'm getting a seat, aisle seat, right?
I am desperate to find an actual human at an airport.
Well, good luck. So I'll give you an example.
But you're probably flying alone, right? Business
yes.
travel, you've
Yeah.
got your carry-on, you have no issues. You just
Okay.
wanna, I am flying with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Fair enough.
And a husband and a check bag and a stroller, and they've separated our
I feel
party
for you.
because they changed the equipment after we selected our seats, and I can't find a freaking person to override the systems. Human touch is still going to be
Okay, bad example. Let me try another one. So let me try another one, which is, I don't particularly like going shopping, but if you go to a store, I see there are 2 pain points.
Okay.
One is I can't find anything that I want in an aisle. So imagine going to Home Depot, you're looking for something, you can't find it aisle to aisle.
Okay.
I'm looking for a salesperson, I can't find one.
Okay.
Finally, I find salesperson, I walk towards them, they walk away from me, right? That's problem number 1.
That might be a you thing, though.
That may be my thing.
Home Depot salespeople love me.
Yeah, well, that's you. So I'm saying, why can't they have an iPad there where I scan the item that I want, and it tells me which aisle it is? I don't want a human touch. I just want a technology solution in that case. Second pain point,
Okay.
you buy something, and then you're standing in line.
Yeah.
There's always 10 people ahead of you, and invariably somebody wants to return something that takes half an hour. Why can't I just pay and go, right? It's, again, I don't need a human interaction, I need a technology. So I think there are situations where technology can actually be helpful, and there are situations where you need the people. So just we need to find the right combination as to when humans are needed.
Completely fair. I think what's interesting, though, in your example on shopping, my first company was an e-commerce company, and I, as a woman who loves fashion, enjoys shopping for the most part. I'm tall, so it's not always a good experience. Is that you think about particularly how online shopping has changed the expectation for a lot of consumers, is there's a very different experience with a search process versus a browse process, right? Search is when you go to Amazon and you know exactly what you need.
Yeah.
Ideally, you even know the brand, and you pop it in, you find the thing, you add to cart, you check out. Browse is when you're like, I'm in the mood for a vest. I wonder what kind. Should it be cropped? I'm gonna go to the mall, and I'm gonna go to a couple of stores, and I'm gonna try on a bunch, and we're gonna see if this is a trend that I should get behind or just keep going past. And the answer is you keep going past. Vests will not still be around next season. Those are 2 very different jobs to be done in the shopping experience.
And you just explained 2 very different segments. I'm a kind of guy who goes into a shop, picks up item, walks away in like 2 seconds.
And I am that person for certain categories, right? And so I think when you think about sort of the role of marketing and the functions it plays, I think it could give us more granularity in that specificity of not even just the type of customer, oh, Sunil versus Christina, but even Christina looking for duct tape versus Christina trying to decide if she should partake in a fashion trend that is a disaster waiting to happen. And that, I think that could be really powerful for marketers in the future. I think the challenge is sort of back to the like, this feels overwhelming, right? With the amount of channels and messages and tactics and data points and all of the moving pieces. How do you keep this, all these all of the moving pieces, how do you make sure that they still bubble up to something consistent and strategic and aligned with the bigger picture of the brand and not get lost in 50 different decks?
But I think there I will go back to what Jeff Bezos has always said, that focus on things that will stay constant, not the things that will change. And what will stay constant is people are always looking for value. And we should always think about how do we, as marketers or brands, add value to the consumers. That will never change. The tools and the channels will change, but that basic principle. So I think marketing will always remain a consumer-first sort of a principle. And the ways to learn about consumers will change because we have more data, we can personalize more, we can target better. We also have to make a distinction between when we are actually snooping on people versus when we, I mean, that's one of the things that I find that if you talk to companies like, I mean, I don't want to pick on Google alone, but let's say pick Google for a moment, and they say, well, I'm providing value to consumers because I'm giving relevant ads. I say, showing me ads is not value, by the way, right? I talk to a lot of CMOs who say, I want to build relationship with the consumers, and that's how I want to know you. I say, I have hardly time to build a relationship with my family. Why would I build a relationship with a bar of soap and a can of soda? So I think we just sometimes, as brands, we sort of simplify things as if consumers are desperately looking to build a relationship with brands. They're not.
I hear you. I do, and I've never once clicked on a Google search ad in my entire life. And, it's an and, not an or. There's something about Instagram ads.
You will learn a lot about Christina from this conversation.
There's some, I have bought so much from Instagram ads. They know, and I go through on the regular and clear out my interests from the back end of the Meta ad preferences. I clear it out because I don't want them to know anything about me. And yet,
Mark Zuckerberg is listening to you right now.
They are. Jumpsuits, shoes for my children, multivitamins. I buy everything, almost everything that Instagram, it's bad. So there's value.
There you go.
Occasionally.
There you go. So switching gears, as the world keeps moving, what skills do people in marketing need?
I mean, fundamentally, they need to be willing to constantly learn and test and iterate. They have to be as entrepreneurial as any founder. Is I think marketing, more than any other discipline in business, changes the fastest. It's at the intersection of technology and culture, and those are constantly changing. I mean, it's annoying teaching marketing classes because I have to rewrite my cases far faster than my friends over in the operations department. But it's just, you have to stay like one eye focused on what's happening and stay in learning mode. And I think that's true not just in like the skills of the marketing job. I think that's true also in terms of like the other things that interest you. My book on the portfolio life is very focused on how do you build a diverse skill set, a diverse network, a diverse set of interests that allow you to zigzag in that moment of disruption. And I think basically all professionals, but particularly marketing professionals, would do well to cultivate diversity in your portfolio.
I 100% agree. I think it's just curiosity to learn, but also willingness to challenge the assumption. I'll tell you a little story. I was in China several years ago, and I was talking to the CEO of Coca-Cola in China. And he told me that they have a teen board of advisors. I said, why do you have a teen board of advisors? Don't you have young people in your company that you can ask? They said, well, the youngest person who works in our company is 21 years old, and they think very differently than a 14-year-old. So even that difference is very different. So we need to, and they get 15 people of that age as their quote-unquote teen board of advisors. They get insight from them as to how young people, 13, 14-year-olds think. They give them a bunch of goodies, they're happy, and they get free consulting in some ways. So I think if you believe you know consumers, you probably don't, because just 5 years difference, there's a very, very different mindset and thought process.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to always challenge our assumptions, and the world keeps changing very quickly.
Yeah. Should we take some questions?
Sure.
Ooh, quick one right down here. Ooh, we got a microphone for you.
Hi, my name is Swami. I completely agree with you, sir. Like, actually, the marketing spend will surely decide the top line. But at the same time, like, if we are not using the marketing spend in a strategic way on mitigating the negative impact the corporate companies are making, it will eventually dent the top line. Just a quick example, like Coke, Pepsi, and all these companies, they're selling all these PET bottles and all the stuff, but we don't see any infrastructure to collect those stuff back and avoiding them from landfill. So like the sustainable marketing strategies should be the way to go, so that we can ensure like the global warming, climate change, all those things can be mitigated.
And again, I think ultimately consumers will speak about that, right? If consumers dislike the way the companies are marketing because they're wasting the plastic bottles everywhere, etc. But you know, some of the data is mixed, in the sense people say they like sustainability, but when it comes down to putting the dollars, it's not quite consistent with that. So I give you an example of my kids, although it's always a bad idea to pick only one example, but I'll take that example anyway. So they are very much into sustainability, but they buy so many things from Amazon, and the number of cardboard boxes that they collect is so many. I say, on one hand, you talk about sustainability. On the other hand, you're wasting all these landfills and cardboard boxes. How does it align? And they say, well, it's too convenient. So I think there's a distinction between what you believe on one hand versus what you actually do when it comes to shopping. So eventually, hopefully, there is at least enough growing number of people who will align with what they think in terms of when they actually go and shop. So companies react to that more than anything else.
We got a wave in our hand over here. I like a good hand wave.
Thank you. My name is Mina. I actually work for Google as a growth marketer.
I'm in trouble.
That's why I was waving my hand. So, question for you. We touched on a number of really important things in terms of how landscape is changing and how we're reaching the right people at the right time to influence that last click purchase. How do you view this disruptive market that we're in with respect to brand loyalty? I strongly believe is still there. It just depends on the generation and the people that we're tailoring our marketing to. So how, from your POV, do we bridge the gap between data that we have at our disposal, first-party data, consumer behavior, buying journey gap from discovery or searching to browsing, and then as a marketer, reaching the people at the right time and the right moment so that purchase happens? How do you bridge that gap leveraging technology and AI?
I'm already in the penalty box for Google, so you should answer that.
I mean, for me, the through line has always been, whether it's loyalty or taking that moment from discovery all the way through consideration to purchase to referral, has to be in the story and ultimately through a relationship, a community, right? This is, I believe in a lot in the investment in community and ecosystem. So thinking very deeply about the role that your brand can play in this consumer's life, and not just very functionally with that product, but what role it can play, like Dollar Shave Club for your son, social, emotionally, right? What does that mean? What identity does it convey on them, and how does that, how do you keep them in that relationship on an ongoing way. I think there's a bigger picture here around story, and I'm definitely biased as a storyteller to think that story matters more than we've been giving it credit for. But for all the data and all of the analytics that help us slice and dice and give us customers on a plate, we can't forget the story piece of the equation.
So let me add to that, was what 100% agree with that, is two things. One is, I think there are two sides of marketing. One is performance marketing, the other is brand marketing. Performance marketing is you spend money, you get a click, you get a return very quickly, you acquire a customer, you make a sale. That's a short-term thing. If you think about building brand, that's for the long run. And I think there's always a trade-off in terms of what do you build for the long run versus what's the return. So the Googles of the world, God bless them, but I think that balance has tilted a lot more towards performance marketing because we see the results, we measure it, but we shouldn't forget the brand building part of it. That's equally important, and that's where the storytelling comes. The second thing I will say, exactly what Christina was saying, is we need to understand how the product fits into the consumer's life. Let me give you a very tangible example. DBS Bank in Singapore, this was many years ago, they were trying to build a mobile app for loans, for mortgage, for consumers. And the team built a mortgage app and showed it to CEO Piyush Gupta. And they were very proud because people could apply for the mortgage on that app. Very quickly, the data will be pulled from different sources, and you will be approved within minutes. So the team was very proud. They took it to the CEO, and the CEO says, not good enough. And people say, why? We built a great customer experience. And he says, nobody gets up in the morning excited about buying mortgage. We are thinking about mortgage. So think about what people are excited about. People are excited about buying a house, not buying a mortgage. So think beyond your product. We think about customer journey. We're not thinking about customer journey. We think of product journey. Start from product, end with product. So what they ended up doing was they actually, in Singapore, they integrated a lot of the town data, publicly available town data, into the app. So if you're looking for a house in Singapore, you can put your phone in front of that house. Their camera will capture the image of the house, and it will tell you what was the previous transaction prices, which is the nearest grocery store, which is the nearest train station. All that is useful information before you think about buying that house. Once you think this is the right house for you, then you might want to say, can I afford it? And of course, there's a mortgage calculator, right? So just understanding as to where your product fits into the customer life is too important because we just focus too much on this narrow view of the world. So I think, again, it's a combination of art and science. We need both. We need Google, but we also need storytelling.
The hard part about that is that the performance side is so quantifiable.
It's so quantifiable.
Right? You know how much you spent, you can see the clicks, you can show A/B test which one is better.
Yeah.
And the brand side is so not quantifiable.
Yeah.
Not only is it not quantifiable, it's delayed, not quantifiable.
Yes.
And so sales is very quantifiable, performance marketing is quantifiable, brand is not. So if you're thinking about particularly in moments where money is tight and we're trying to really show ROI on budgets, and marketing in particular feels more like a cost center than a revenue center, even though it is in fact a driver of revenue, you're going to see why it's really easy to shortchange the brand side, the storytelling side, which is probably why the CMO job is the fastest turnover job in the C-suite.
But that's why I think marketing will always be a combination of art and science, and you need both math and theater to do that. So you're perfectly suited for that.
Down here in the blue.
My question is regarding the SEO and SEM. I work in the travel industry, and one of the challenges facing the industry right now is that rather than going on Google, people are going to ChatGPT and asking for itineraries. And the travel industry as a whole is worried that if at some point ChatGPT starts recommending specific websites, then what would that mean for companies in terms of doing traditional SEO and SEM? And if that were to be a pivot point where now people go to ChatGPT and there are certain platforms recommended, what would that mean for like the traditional marketing, and what would be the impact for that?
I mean, I did that last week. I'm going to Mexico City next week to speak. Woo! Speak at the Harvard Club next weekend. And never been to Mexico City, so I went to ChatGPT and said, I'm bringing my 5-year-old. Give me an itinerary for 3 days appropriate for a 5-year-old who eats only bland food.
Good luck.
And I don't speak Spanish, so. And it didn't send me to direct websites. It just made my itinerary. Here are the specific things to do. So it wasn't even, like it's worse than you think, right? It's not, here's the intermediary that we're interrupting. It's, here's straight through to the end. Go to the Frida Kahlo Museum, here's the link to book your tickets. Go take a boat tour, don't bother booking that in advance, you can negotiate when you get there, right? Like, so the fear, and you're right to be terrified, is this entire channel of SEO and SEM is going to be gone.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. So the next question is, with this behavior change, where else can you insert yourself in the customer journey to be able to participate in helping the customer have a delightful travel experience? We don't know yet. But this might be something really useful in getting ahead of the curve and doing some customer research, doing some ethnographies with people who are using ChatGPT, and get a sense of, well, that's not the only thing they're doing. You know, run one quick itinerary and then hop on a plane. What else are they doing? And where else are they going? And who else are they trusting? And how might that become a platform or an opportunity to build a platform of the future?
Yeah, I think it's an open question as to what will happen. And ChatGPT and Perplexity, they're all figuring it out because they're also going to go into advertising. They're going to make money through advertising as well. So if you think about it as to how Google started indexing all the websites based on which you do SEO or SEM, well, how does ChatGPT know which articles to pull to give you the answer? Mm-hmm. And there'll be another kind of indexing. Once we learn that black box, then you can do your different version of SEO and SEM, which we don't know yet, right?
And in the meantime, there's going to be this lovely little dip
yes,
as
yes.
SEO and SEM, as they currently exist, die off, and before the next platform.
And some of the companies I talk to, they're already building their website based on, so they're putting prompts into ChatGPT, seeing what response comes out, and based on that responses, they're building their website. So hoping that ChatGPT sort of figures that out. So who knows? At this point in time, it's still very bad. So I'm with you. Please.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Anna. I have a question about digital marketing, and I'm very far from it. I work in investments, but do you think at some point people will get oversaturated because we have so much information? You know, Instagram, LinkedIn. Personally, like I'm already tired of like blocking every single marketing campaign. Do you think consumers will reach a point at which like they will, you know, be oversaturated? It'll be too much. And how do they do about it?
I mean, I think for the most part, we're already there, right? I've certainly developed the ability to scan a website and just not look at ads. I also use every ad blocker in the book on my Chrome browser to not, most of them don't load. You know, like for most of us, it is too much, which is why in many cases, ad spend, like the cost is going up because they have to show the ad to even more people. The impressions have to go up for it to be effective. I don't know, I think as a category, digital marketing is gonna have to find an innovation to figure out a more effective way to actually capture attention.
Yeah. And I mean, think about it. What is the typical click-through rate? 1%. When was the last time 99% of the time you failed and call it a success? This is what digital marketing is, that we have 1% click-through and we call it a success. That's because people don't particularly like doing that. So you're right, we have already reached that point, and that's why the combination of digital and physical will always be the dominant factor. I mean, a lot of the stores are basically an ad for the store. If you look at LVMH and Champs-Élysées in Paris, they really don't sell as much as is basically an advertising for the LVM edge. So physical stores become a mechanism to sort of get the people more customer experience, more in the stores, and building loyalty that way. So I think the pendulum will swing back and forth, and that always has been the case. Yep.
Do I have to turn this on? Hi, I'm Asi. I'm here from Dallas, and I wanted to ask, obviously with this conversation of SEO possibly going away and AI taking over, as a small business owner, do you recommend, in your best recommendation, at this point to maybe put a pause on spending so much on Google Ads or SEO, maybe hold on to that cash for a minute and try different marketing strategies, or do you feel like we still should be pushing in that direction even though people are moving away from it?
I mean, if I were in your shoes, I would not be dumping cash in that channel right now. This is not a recommendation. Think of this as tax. This is not advice. I would not be doing it. I would be looking for stronger ways to build a more meaningful impression on a more targeted, like almost surgical way to intercept the right customers. What I mean by that, have a better way of qualifying your customers and targeting them, find the watering holes they're already hanging out at, show up there, both online and in person. Think about partnerships with other brands or other communities that would make sense. Think about activations or other opportunities to experience your product or your brand in person so they get to jump all the way to the point of testing and not have to just like stop at awareness. I would think much more about a higher quality interaction for a higher quality prospect further down the funnel than dumping money into SEO right now.
I think I'll qualify that with one thing, which is I agree with most of you what you're saying, but if you believe your Google ads, $1 on Google ads is giving you a return more than $1 even now, then that makes sense. You still have to experiment other ways, exactly what Christina said, because the world is changing. So what you're doing today may not be there tomorrow. But if today your return on investment is positive, then keep doing it, at least till the short run, because otherwise your traffic will stop coming, right? So at least in the short run, you've got to still figure out as to what's the right thing for the short run, although they may not be the right thing for the long run. Okay, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions.
Maybe get one in the back area. We got a hand way back there.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Commissioner. We are talking about profit organizations a lot. I think I'm interested in non-profit, right? The volunteer retention, how do we attract them? And I myself use typical marketing strategies that you just mentioned, but we were not able to capture volunteer retention, or donor retention, so to say. Both, a little bit of both, volunteer and donor retention. So are there any tips and tricks that you can provide?
I mean, not to end with a Broadway story, but I feel like we need to end with a Broadway story. So there's a beautiful new musical that just opened on Broadway called Real Women Have Curves. And it is based on the movie, which I believe is based on a play. So it's all, and it is one of the best reviewed, most beautiful musicals on Broadway right now. And it is probably going to close in a couple of weeks as a complete financial failure. Because they are doing absolutely terrible marketing. All of their marketing is their title, which if you've ever heard of the movie, might get you excited. But if you don't have any context for it, you probably think this musical is about either body positivity or weight loss. In fact, it's about immigrants in LA and labor relations and a multi-generational story overcoming the odds and factories, and it's all of these things that are relevant today, but the title is terrible, and they're counting on this throwback to a thing that no one has a connection to, and none of the key art is useful, and none of the assets that they've put out gives you any emotional connection to this. It's a crowded time in the season because everyone was trying to get in before the Tony nominations, and so no one's paying attention. And this beautiful, gorgeous piece of theater is going to be a total flop, and it's going to be devastating. And I see this happen in certainly nonprofit arts all the time, where they put the thing out there and they think, I will just tell people that it exists. And the people who love such things will then show up. And they don't in any way explain what it is or why this is the thing that you should dedicate your time and love to. Because these things are no longer just substitutes by this Broadway show versus that Broadway show. Now it's this Broadway show versus staying at home and watching Netflix, or going to the Knicks game, or I don't know, like hopping on the train and go see a friend down on the Acela train, right? Like there are so many other substitutes than just other theater, and we never get past that conversation to say, what is it that we're doing and why would it matter to you? And how might this be an important part of your life? And so I would say for whatever your nonprofit is, get past the marketing that is simply, we exist. Do you want to come? Because that's usually where nonprofits stop.
Great. I think this is a great way to end on this Broadway story. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
So thank you very much. After watching Ryan run around, the idea of having two people sit on stage seemed like it might be a bit of too much of a change, but really awesome takeaways and a fantastic conversation. So thank you, Sunil and Christina. One more time for them, please. Okay, so we're going to take another break. We'd like to be back in here at 4 o'clock so that we can start the community challenge. Gosh, it's getting late in the day for me. Start the community challenge, and since those are all your peers up here, please be back in time to see them on stage to pitch their ideas. Thank you.
Now, do you have the dates for next year already?
No, we don't typically do it.